Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the final part of this second day of the 2021 ShadeMed conference. We will proceed with the presentations of the working groups before ending the conference with a short wrap-up by Rear Admiral Stefano Turchetto. Each working group has had several hours yesterday and this morning to discuss their topics and prepare policy recommendations to the EU. Thank you to each individual who contributed wisdom, experience, and creative ideas to their respective working group. Now it is time to present the outcomes. Each working group lead has 15 minutes for their summary. Again, a reminder, all speakers, please make sure your microphone is turned on before you commence speaking and turned off when you are finished. We are going to begin with the leaders of Working Group 3, who will now present what their group discussed and came up with as policy recommendations for the topic of human security. Kate Sedkowska, Gender Advisor to the Operation Commander Irini, and Paul Fonsalis, Political Advisor to the Operation Commander, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Dara. Good afternoon, everyone. Can you see our slides, Dara? Okay, Jim from Markham has confirmed, yes. So we were Working Group 3, a small but very fine group of people who discussed the topic of human security and what the EU can do to enhance human security in Libya. Kate will proceed with our agenda.
So our agenda was, first of all, we introduced to each other. Later on, we brainstormed about the human security and what this term means. And then we went to the introduction about gender and children and minorities. And then we briefly discussed the situation in Libya and also the EU activities that are taken in Libya. And of course, we proceed with our discussions, and the basic questions or basic topics during the discussions were human rights situation in Libya, situation of women, children, and minorities, as well as EU activities in Libya. And finally, we came to the recommendations.
So we began our brainstorming via a tool called slido.com for those of you who do not know it. And online, we brainstormed and tried to, together with the participants, in 2 words, describe what does human security actually mean. So I think people-centered and human rights is a key part of it. And it's definitely true that human security is not granted and should not be taken for granted, and is not granted in Libya especially. But Kate, what does it actually mean?
Well, actually, it's, as you mentioned, that people-centered. So these are the most important definitions that we came up with. And it is also connected with UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are freedom from fear, freedom from want, and freedom from indigeneity. And this is what we all agreed upon.
There are different dimensions of human security that are displayed on the slide, but it is true that this is a very broad concept, and that's why it has also raised criticism from many people, saying it is ill-defined, there are competing definitions, it diverts the attention away from real hard security matters. But nevertheless, we try to address this topic in a constructive way.
Later on, we moved on the introduction to gender. We defined the definition and the situation about children's minorities and what is going on in Libya. So we came up with also the statement, as you can see in this table, like we take into consideration women, men, boys, and the girls, because all of them have different security needs, and these are some examples of these differences. Then we came with the term about the gender equality, or gender equity, which is providing equal opportunities to all of these four groups, as I mentioned, to men, women, boys, and girls. And then we also came with the gender perspective, which is very important to have this ability or this knowledge, bearing in mind that men, women, boys, and girls have different security needs and are being affected in different way due to the situations. And we also were talking about the gender mainstreaming, which is also included in IRINI operations, like on each level of our operations, and that should be also introduced in every organizations or every country.
At a later point, we took a look at refugees, migrants, and internally displaced persons who are among the most vulnerable in Libya. And we looked at some charts from the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, which show that not only with regard to the refugee trends, but also with regard to the internally displaced persons, since the ceasefire of last year, there has been a reduction in numbers. So one can say that the situation has slightly stabilized, but is still not good.
Then we also mentioned the situation about children in Libya, that still there are lots of children in need, and the UN is providing help, but also the data are not so available about this situation because of the unstable situation in this country. And also we got some data from UNICEF, like still lots of children and lots of people in need, and the UNICEF is working for them. So we then came up to the minorities, and we also defined it as being kind of group that is really discriminated in many ways, and the situation is really difficult for them.
And just to have an overview of the situation for young people in Libya, we can see in this slide that many are very young and a lot of them are unemployed. So among this large group of young people in Libya, women are especially limited in their engagement. And over the last 10 years, if we look at the Human Development Index, we can see that the situation has become much worse in Libya. It was once ranked 51st of 182 nations, and now it's among the 80 nations that have the worst Human Development Index. But it would be possible, if there would be peace, sustainable peace in Libya, to improve the situation and especially the economy. A recent study by the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia showed that for the entire region, there's a potential of an increase of $162 billion by 2025 if the Libyan situation improves. Then we continued with a short discussion on how we can actually improve the human security situation, or let's better say, how can the European Union contribute to this? And Kate, what does the EU do in Libya at the moment?
At the moment, we, the presentation is not loading, but nevertheless, the EU all the time spends lots of money to enhance the situation in Libya. We have several military and civilian missions, not only in Libya, but in the Mediterranean region. And also the COVID response was provided by EU to Libya, and also some countries, they already offered the delivery of vaccinations. So now I think we can move towards the recommendations. We have also brainstormed a little bit in using the slido.com, and we put some recommendations first as a brainstorm, but then we formulate the actual recommendations.
So it's clear, and this would be a more general policy recommendation, that only in a stable framework and situation with fair and free elections, hopefully on December 24th, will it be possible to improve the human security of Libyans and migrants, as well as refugees, women, children in Libya. So apart from this, all foreign forces and mercenaries need to leave Libya. But now let's come to the more concrete policy recommendations. So there should be direct support for migrants evacuations was one opinion of our working group. The EU should enhance solutions and perspectives for the most vulnerable, especially non-Libyan nationals who are trapped in a cycle of violence. Primary emphasis should be on evacuation mechanisms to countries of origin and the EU. Second, ensuring human rights of intercepted migrants. Our group proposed that the EU should acknowledge the findings of the independent fact-finding mission of the UNHRC on Libya, including their reports and with special regards to the refugee detention centers. As we learned in panel 2 yesterday, there are currently 7,000 migrants detained. The EU needs to pressure Libyan authorities that there needs to be a clear protocol of what happens once migrants are rescued and back in Libya. At the moment, there is no data available on their well-being, but only on those who are detained. Third, increase access of NGOs. So the access of NGOs at the moment is limited, and the EU should do more to enhance cooperation. And I will now hand over to Kate for the next recommendation.
So enhancing returns from Libya. So this relates to voluntary returns, and a clear messaging is needed for migrants toward what expects them in their countries of origin. Moreover, EU needs to better involve migrants and Libyan perspective to understand their motives for migration and also their needs, as well as what would convince them to return to their country of origin voluntarily. Support bilateral labor agreement. Libya is a country in need of foreign workers, so EU should support strategic agreement with countries of origin, and this would need to include legal safeguards for those working in areas such as the construction sector to avoid migrants from having no rights to security and prevent them from losing perspective. Moreover, Europe, in order to elevate the pressure on Libya and enhance coordination with African Union, so to take stock of existing and increase cooperation, and also increase target information campaigns. So this could discourage especially sub-Saharan nations from traveling to Libya.
And I will quickly sum up the last recommendations, which is to implement a search and rescue mission in the Mediterranean, promote legal and safe corridors to Europe in order to alleviate the pressure in Libya, and create a thematic working group of ShadeMed so that the people who were in this group can stay in contact. This concludes our briefing, and we hand over back to Dara.
Thank you, Kate and Paul. Next is Working Group 2, which discussed new directions in maritime security. This group was led by NATO Marcom's political advisor, Professor James Bergeron. Professor Bergeron, please.
Slide. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Group 2 had some very good conversations both yesterday afternoon and this morning. Allow me to present you the results of the Working Group 2 jury. Right. Yesterday afternoon, we used that time to discuss the challenge of climate security in the Mediterranean. And it was generally the case for both the climate security and the cyber conversations, maybe wrapped up in the name, New Directions in Maritime Security, that people were less familiar, including experts, were feeling their way towards what recommendations we might make. That's because because these are new concepts. It's also because they are already being dealt with at very high political level by big international organizations, by the United Nations, by COP26, but less so for cyber. And so we have some further things to say there. For climate security, there was a general sense of the room and an agreement that climate change is a vital concern in the world, but it's particularly a vital concern in the Mediterranean, which is heating up faster than the rest of the world in terms of average temperatures. And also, given the vulnerability of the Mediterranean basin to extreme weather, to water shortages, to drought, and to impacts on agriculture. So for all of this, there was a very strong sense that the Med is very vulnerable. We expect to see strategic changes due to decarbonization and net zero. We had a very good conversation on the implications of net zero for the oil-producing countries in the region. Many will attempt to transition to becoming competitive energy providers in a post-carbon world. Some will succeed, others may not. But there will be a shift in economic, social, and political prospects in the region and beyond the region that we will have to keep watch on. Much of the conversation dealt with the merchant shipping world. And there's a general sense that the merchant shipping world can adapt to a net carbon zero universe, but it will take time, and particularly it will be costly. At least in the short to medium term, the cost will be significant. We had a conversation about the general raised costs of the net zero goal, and there was a general understanding that the cost would go up, but by how much was debated. We were asked to consider the impact on secondary markets of the impact of climate change and the shift away from a petroleum-based economy. For example, oil byproducts that could become very scarce, and the fact that carbon neutral or carbon zero sources of energy require new vital enablers, such as rare earth minerals. And so, again, the geopolitics of scarcity and of international competition will shift in those areas as well. There's also been a recognition that there is a ever greater emphasis on the undersea seabed and the mineral resources there, which also are relevant to a post-carbon world in terms of those vital materials. And finally, perhaps almost might have gone first, but there was a general recognition that one of the greatest geostrategic risks of climate change in the Mediterranean is the potential instability it may cause across the Mediterranean basin, but particularly in North Africa, and the risks of mass human movements that could be generated if areas should become inhospitable, or if social and economic pressure leads to political instability. And so that a further it's an exacerbation of what we already see. Or cybersecurity. We had a robust conversation, and I think broke a bit of new ground. First, everyone agreed that cyber represents a major threat. And indeed, I was corrected, not challenged, it's a threat. We agreed with that, given what we're seeing around the world. The degree to which cyber represented a specific maritime challenge was debated. We discussed the fact that to date, direct cyber attacks on individual ships are relatively rare occurrences, although they are growing. However, given the example of Maersk, we saw a significant risk to the merchant shipping world as firms. As firms, they are vulnerable. And we also agree that ships are vulnerable. But to date, as one of our participants put it, it's no greater a risk than piracy is. Although most people recognize that the incidences of GPS jamming and spoofing and the direct delivery of ransomware threats to individual ships at sea is growing. Although there aren't that many, and the amounts asked, the financial amounts asked, are usually small. Nonetheless, it is growing. So one of our recommendations is, if that is something to watch, the incidence of cyber manipulation or cyber attack, not just on the firms like headquarters, but on the ships themselves. We discussed the naval examples of of a merchant ship in the Gulf being lured into Iranian territorial waters, and the example of a Swedish task group that was AIS depicted as being, or sorry, GPS depicted as being in the territorial waters of the Russian Federation off Kaliningrad, whereas in fact they were in home port in Sweden. So that increasing use of spoofing, which started about 5 years ago, but is now becoming more and more common. And finally, we looked at what the shipping world and the international community should do. We looked at the IMO best practices, and the general sense of the room was that remains the bedrock, which was produced by the international shipping community, accepted by the International Maritime Organization, and remains the primary guide for the commercial shipping community. As a final point, we made this point for NATO, but it's true for the EU as well. That as shippers encounter cyber, just as they encounter other forms of maritime security, both organizations have interfaces with the shipping community that is very interested to know about this and can offer advice. And I think that is generally what I would sum up. I think that because these were relatively new topics, it was more of a learning experience. Hard recommendations were harder to come by, but I would agree personally with Paul's recommendation, closing Working Group 3, which is a thematic group to take the conversation forward between annual conferences, would make a lot of sense. And that's it from Group 2.
Thank you, Professor Bergeron. Last but not least, Captain Alberto Mancini from the Italian Navy, who is the head of the CJ7 training branch in the headquarters of Irini. Captain Mancini will present the summary of Working Group 1, which worked on ways to enhance the EU's capacity building and training. Captain Mancini, please.
Good afternoon to everyone. I'll try to share now my presentation. Hopefully will work fine. Okay. Are you able to see? Okay. The aim of Working Group 1 was, as depicted in the slide, sharing consideration on how to enhance EU capacity building and training initiatives in the Mediterranean. We felt the need to anticipate the discussion with a preliminary meeting which was held the day prior, the beginning of ShadeMed, the 6th, and was, I would say, very fruitful to determine some common background for the follow-on discussion. In particular, we depicted the Mediterranean strategic context in a common understanding of how the Mediterranean Sea has a history of highly contested area and interests. The Mediterranean basin might become increasingly marginalized from the unilateral territorialization of the economic security zone as a center of gravity among three continents. The Mediterranean has been influenced by powerful regional and global actors. Consequently, the international community is facing an interconnected dynamics stimulating geopolitical and geostrategic rivalries. In this context, an improved maritime security in Libyan waters is crucial for the stability in the whole Mediterranean and may also enable economic development and stabilization in Libya. Focusing a bit more towards Libya, in line with the Berlin II conference conclusion, certainly the withdrawal of foreign forces represent a challenge for Libyan international community. Libya is in a desperate need to mediate solution to preserve the political roadmap and to ensure political transition for election. Improvement of maritime security is an enabling factor to boost economy in Libya and the entire Mediterranean area. And with regard to maritime security, the development of capacities of the Libyan Coast Guard Navy as a maritime security provider is a fundamental step on the way to improve maritime security and boosting economic development. Capacity building and training activities in favor of the Libyan Coast Guard and Navy is therefore a fundamental part of the Libyan development approach. During the preliminary meeting, the audience was able to gain even a further detailed understanding of the capacity building and training initiatives ongoing thanks to representatives of DGNIR, UDEL, UBAM, UNODC that made quite interesting and thorough presentation. And from all this presentation, certainly was clear to everyone a bit better which is the meaning and significance of capacity building activity, which a wide umbrella of activities that are let's say that could be included under this pretty wide definition. For what is regard Irene, we clarify how Irene is undergoing the consequences of a political stalemate with Libya, but despite of this, is continuing to develop let's say develop its task to enhance the development of the capacity and the training of the Libyan Coast Guard. And in specific, we develop a new capacity building plan, especially thanks to the establishment of the new instruments, financial instrument that has been established in favor of the CSDP mission and operation, the European Peace Facility, EPF so-called. The training of the Libyan Coast Guard, despite of all capacity building, remain a Libyan priority, especially to the east, and this is testified by the recent MOU signed between a member state and the GNU. So coming to the let's say the results of the discussions, given the setup of the elements that I presented before, we elaborated some ideas, and I would say some very fruitful brainstorming came into place to define the results that I will present soon after on these three bullets: EU engagement in the southern Mediterranean, in particular how to improve the EU engagement in the southern Mediterranean, so to Libya, how to impress a more effective EU integrated approach with regard to Libya, and future development engagement. I will resume, let's say, the total, let's say, the different bullets that pertains to all three items we discussed in the last two sessions. In particular, we clearly discuss how the Libyan political roadmap and the development of it will determine a substantial impact for future engagements in capacity building and training. The Libyan political will in centralizing the Libyan towards the Libyan Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the coordination for all external cooperation activities has determined a substantial decrease of capacity building and training activities to Libya. Therefore, EU is proceeding with a tendentially unilateral approach in providing capacity building and training initiative, not having so many feedback and so many priorities dictated by the Libyan political side. Capacity building and training remain a crucial EU priority, being a fundamental part of the development and stabilization process. Therefore, there is the need to enhance the synchronization of EU and Libya priorities in all areas of capacity building and training, with particular focus to maritime security, especially for Irene, under the consideration on how an improvement in maritime security will impact the economic boost, not only for Libya, but for the central, for the Mediterranean area. There was an agreement on following EU priorities, stated by the head of UDEL Libya during some other meetings and conference. And I would want to read with you. The EU priorities are certainly identified in protection of migrants, which is one of the main aim of EU, but also migrants governance, which pertains more to the Libyan side of the issue, border sovereignty, Libyan economic growth, and certainly Libyan reunification and reconciliation. Those priorities have to find some kind of match correspondence with the Libyan ones in order to enhance the effectiveness of the EU initiatives that we have seen and are quite detailed, and overall are also, let's say, including quite a large amount of funds that EU is investing for the development of all these in all these priorities. In this view lies the proposal to engage the Libyan Ministry of Foreign Affairs to build possibly some thematic coordination boards to enhance the synchronization process between Libya and EU. It is foreseen and is highlighted in bold to underline the importance that was discussed, the need to propose with a proactive bottom-up approach a new coordination conference seminar on capacity building and training activity to enhance effectiveness through a EU united synergy and integrated approach. The aim of this conference will be to streamline effort in planning current and future EU initiatives, correlating them with EU priorities. Furthermore, as a result of the conference, a new strategic plan on capacity building and training could be proposed to the EU political line, serving also as a reference for the synchronization with the Libyan political counterparts. The audience foreseen for such a coordination conference and seminar will be comprised of both EU key entities involved in capacity building and training activities, but also member states representatives, in order to include since the beginning possible point of view and sensitiveness raised by different member states. The conference might become for the future a recognized EU steering body that could periodically assess and revise the overall EU strategy on capacity building and training. The event will possibly be arranged in February-March 2022, so in a time where hopefully we will possibly see some definition of the aftermath of the election period. There is also the need of establish some kind of coordination, the confliction activity with regard to capacity building activities initiated by EU, other entities, and or other third state, and our UN colleague participating to the working group proposed that this could be also held, this activity could be held under a UN umbrella. Despite the development of capacity building activity, there is still the need for training activity, and this is confirmed by the recent signature of a memorandum of understanding between GNU and a member state to train the Libyan Coast Guard in the Benghazi area, which is the eastern area, opening therefore also, let's say, possibility to theoretically expand EU and or Irini activity to the east of Libya. we discussed some, let's say, hypotheses for which could possibly be the Libyan priorities. And certainly we know border management, especially to the south, is one of the priority clearly declared by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, together with the Libyan economic growth, which is tied to the development of a secure and safe environment at sea, and therefore maritime security, and certainly the reunification between the east and west sides of Libya. EU capacity building activities in the field of integrated border management should include the coordination cooperation between also with the UCAP Sahel Niger and UCAP Sahel Mali, which at present are not involved into this discussion and are covering also the EU point of view to the south of the Libyan country, and therefore should be included into the discussion. Then we had also consideration over the expansion of capacity building and training with regard to the participation of dedicated exercise that could be even developed in close coordination with European agencies. And last but not least, we open some consideration with regard to the recent EU discussion of conditioning capacity building activity to the provision of training, with the provision of training. This has been discussed as could bring some more counterproductive effect towards the EU engagement. Instead, the proposal will be to stream forward the enhancement of a time-effective provision of capacity building activity deliverables and embedding within into it training. And therefore, is strongly, let's say, not advised the reduce of the amount and dynamics of capacity building activity. That's all for working group 1.
Thank you, Captain Mancini. We are approaching the end of ShadeMed 2021. We have heard enlightening presentations and discussions from political and military leaders and worked in small working groups to find concrete solutions and suggestions. You can re-watch this conference on our Facebook and YouTube page, and please follow us on our website and social media platforms to remain updated on Operation Irini. Rear Admiral Stefano Turchetto, Operational Commander of EU NAVFOR Med Irini, will now address you with some closing remarks.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for contributing to the 10th edition of ShadeMed. In these 2 conference days, we have the pleasure of welcoming representatives from international organizations such as the United Nations, NATO, IOM, and EU, agencies such as Frontex, Interpol, and DEMSA, as well as several members of NGOs. I can proudly say that we had guests and participants from 31 countries. We had the pleasure to welcome military, diplomats, academics, politicians, and industry representatives to ShadeMed. During the panel sessions and the working groups, every participant was able to develop his or her own impression of this event. It's the aim of ShadeMed to create an opportunity to freely share and reflect one's own opinion by drawing inspiration from what was said by the speakers in the Working Days groups. In the first panel, the speakers highlighted the importance of the EU comprehensive approach to Mediterranean region and discussed how the EU is implementing a holistic and inclusive vision to the region. Following this approach, EUNAVFOR Med Irini continues to represent a part of the solution to the Libyan peace process and stability, together with further political, economic, and diplomatic engagement by the EU. A people-centered approach was the topic of the second panel. During the discussion, panelists highlighted that improving human rights standards should go synergically with other key sectors like security and development. Operation Irini is ready to contribute even more in this regard within the mandated tasks. Finally, speakers agreed that the EU needs to increase its civilian and military efforts in the Sahel to stabilize Northern Africa, including Libya. The significant energy resources and the potential to generate clean energy were addressed as an opportunity for sustainable economy, recovery, and prosperity by the third panel. Despite the friction in the Eastern Mediterranean, energy resources can become a key factor to facilitate economic and political integration. European history after the Second World War has shown that this is possible. The speakers pointed out that another relevant factor for economic prosperity in the region and world trade is freedom of navigation. Irini's presence in the Central Mediterranean represents a concrete contribution to a maritime situation awareness and is perceived as a credible maritime security provider by the shipping community. Today, the fourth panel, perfectly organized by Markham, took place. The panel's main objective was to illustrate and elaborate on the NATO approach to the Mediterranean region. During the debate, distinguished speakers presented the current picture of what NATO is doing in the region from different perspectives, which span from operational activities to humanitarian and environmental policies. The speaker also highlighted the attention that NATO is paying to gender issues and climate changes, not limited to the context of military operations. The panel has provided an outlook to future strategic trends concerning the main challenges in the wider Mediterranean area. I cannot end ShedMed without a special thanks to the insightful contribution of the speakers and the great job done by the moderators that chaired the panels in a highly professional and polite manner. I also want to thank NATO Markham for their effort to co-organize with us this conference and selecting the topics and speakers. Thank you very much. If you missed a part of the conference, please use the opportunity to rewatch the entire event on our Facebook and YouTube channel. Thank you very much to you all for the attention and for participating to ShedMed. See you next year. Really hoping that ShedMed 2022 will be present here in Rome at EUNAVFOR Med Irini HQ.
Admiral Turquetto, thank you for your attendance at this year's ShedMed and your closing remarks. This concludes the 2021 conference. One last time, I remind you that you will be able to re-watch the discussions on our YouTube channel and our Facebook page, as well as on our website. Stay safe and best wishes from Rome to wherever you have joined us over the last few days. Arrivederci.
Ciao Stefano.